Today we're going to install an LRT transmission from GCM Racing into this Tamiya semi-truck. We're going to start with some special components today. The first thing we're going to need is all of the parts that come with the LRT transmission, which includes the pinion gear, the different screw sets that we need, also includes a drill bit, and we're also going to need to add a bunch of hand tools. We're going to need to use 3 different sizes of metric hex wrenches, a 1.5, a 2, and a 2.5, as well as 2 screwdrivers and a hand drill of some kind. And of course we need an amazing Tamiya semi-truck, and in this case we're going to use the Tamiya Volvo FH16. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do on the install is actually remove the cab over plastics here. This has 4 screws here and 2 more in the middle. I already took out a couple of those screws so it'd be a little quicker for us. We're just going to pull this off here. This is the cab mounts for the Volvo FH16. It also includes the seat mounts and the inner fenders. Tamiya usually has a radio tray here of some kind. On the Globeliner and Cascadia there's also a dual servo mount that's put in here. And so there's just a cover plate that has to come off. On this particular truck, there's also a plate on the bottom that has to come off. The battery tray on the Volvo truck is underneath. So we're going to take off the battery tray from the bottom, and that will open up the chassis to just bare rails. This is what we're left with here. And then you'll see there's 2 screws here on each side that actually hold the cross member in, and we're going to take out those 2 screws here for the cross member. And now we can actually spread the cross member a little bit. There's one side of the screws is missing here now, right there. So the frame rail on our truck is clean. We've removed all of the components that would cover up the engine and transmission area, and the Tamiya transmission is out already. Now we're going to do the install of the motor on the LRT transmission. This is going to require the 2mm wrench to take out these screws all the way around the bell housing here. So we have the bell housing loose. We're just going to pull this straight out, and you'll see inside the first spur gears here, and it's ready to accept our motor install. So I'm going to grab the Tamiya motor that came with the kit and line up the 2 mounting holes there, and then I'm going to use the included screws from the LRT kit right here, as well as some Tamiya thread locker and a 2.5mm hex wrench. Put some thread locker on the screw, and then we'll drop that right into the Tamiya motor. The motor plate is designed so that there's no more play in the motor at all. There's no movement in the motor, so once you have this thing attached with the screws, there's no way for you to do it wrong. You can't do this wrong. Now what you're going to do is take out the first gear that's in the transmission, this first stepped gear, and you're going to slide it into the motor plate like this. And then we're going to add the pinion gear, which is also included in the LRT transmission kit. And I'm going to use the 1.5 wrench to get the set screw out, and then I'm going to put some thread lock on that set screw as well. And this will get attached back into the pinion gear like this. Now once I have it on the flat spot of the motor, I'm going to set it up so that it sits just behind the gear. There's a little tiny step here. So the pinion gear is sitting just behind the gear here. You see that? There's a bit of a space there. Just a bit. And then we're going to tighten that down. Just like that. And then this can get some grease on it. We're going to use the Tamiya grease. Just put a little bit of grease on the gear. A few different spots. That will work its way around. And then we'll reinstall this entire setup into the transmission. And then replace the bolts around the bell housing with the 2mm wrench. So those are all tightened down now, all the way around. Just like that. Now there's two key features I'd like you to see on the transmission setup. You see right there, there's a tiny slot right there. And on this side there's a tiny slot right there. There's two tiny slots on it, right there and there. And the second feature I want you to see is this screw hole that's right here at the end of the transmission shaft. So what we're going to do now is we're going to install the rear drive cup onto the tail shaft using that hole. We're going to line up that hole with the set screw that's in the drive cup. So we're going to slide that on, put some thread locker on that, and lining up that screw hole, I'm going to jam the set screw into the drive cup, right in that screw. Right in the hole, there we go. And we'll just wipe off the excess. Perfect. And so now our transmission is ready for an install. And what we're going to do is put this in the frame rail so that these two slots on each side actually sit on the top rail of the semi-truck. So right here is the top of the rail, and the transmission is going to sit right into the top of the rail. So we're going to simply drop this in here and spread out the rail, because we've taken the screws out of the crossmember here so we can flex the rail a little bit. We're going to flex this open and put the transmission down into the frame like that. So it actually sits in the rail. See that? So the transmission is now caught in the rail right here, in that little tiny gap, the little slot. And now this thing can actually move around. So we can move this up ahead, we can move it back, depending on what your build is. There's a whole bunch of setups that you can do. You can move the transmission all over the place depending on how you want your truck built. The way that it seems to work out the best in most of the trucks that we've done so far is there's a set of 3 holes on the frame right here. There's a set of 3 holes on the frame right here. And almost every single time, to put this in a proper location for the stock drive shaft, you actually have the transmission bell housing bolts just ahead of the 3rd hole here. That seems to be how most of the setups have gone. There's a perfect view right there. The transmission bell housing bolts are just ahead of that 3rd hole right there, and the motor position is right up at the front. So the way that it seems to work out most of the time is that's where the transmission position is going to be in order to retain the stock drive shaft. Now we're going to check ours and make sure that that's the case. We should be able to move this around enough to fit that in. There we go. And then we'll line that up at the back of the bell housing bolts. So you can see the position of the bell housing bolts here, lined up just ahead of the 3rd hole. 1, 2, 3, it's just ahead. And our drive shaft is in its completely original position with the factory drive cups. So that's a good spot. Now what we're going to do is turn the truck upside down and install the crossmember, which will fit underneath the transmission under the frame right there on the bottom of the truck. And we're going to do that with the smaller M2 screws that come in the kit. They'll just bolt right in here. We'll drop in the 2nd screw here. Like that. So now the crossmember has been attached to the transmission at the bottom of the truck. You can see that hanging down right there. And now with this all lined up now and the drive shaft in place, everything is going to work. If you want to try it out, you can actually give it a turn, make sure it's all going to work. And good. Check your compression on the drive shaft, it's good. Now what you're going to do is actually drill 2 holes in the frame rail so that you can mount the transmission to the frame using the new crossmember. So we've already included a drill for that. It comes in the kit. And just to make sure that you have the right size of drill, we're actually giving you a drill bit. And all you have to do now is simply pinch the rails together so that you know what position they're in. Line up the crossmember sides and then drill your hole. And that's it. Do that on both sides. Notice I'm using a very low drill speed. Don't use high-speed drilling on steel because you will just damage the drill bit. You just heat up the drill bit. Use very low speed. And now we're going to install the crossmember attachment bolts and the nut. The nut goes on the inside of the frame rail, and the bolt, of course, goes in from the bottom. So the easiest way to do that is just to put the truck on its side and then run the bolt in to the inside through the new hole that you made. And now, starting on the bottom, I'm going to reinstall my bottom plate. Which goes here. Put a couple of bolts in that. And then I'm going to install the top plate. The motor wires will come up through the front here. Like that. And there we go. And here's what the finished product looks like. There's the motor. You can see it in there. There's lots of room under the radio tray for that to fit in. And then going back from there, the drive shaft has tons of room. Lots of room in the back here. You can see there how the nut sits on the back of the frame rail. Right in here. There's the nut on the back of that crossmember mount. And lots of room in there for the transmission. You can kind of get a glimpse through there of the bell housing that sits under the radio tray. And underneath the truck the same. This is the bottom with the bottom mounted radio tray there. On the Volvo there's the new crossmember put in and the LRT transmission. The motor position is in exactly where it would be in the original. And in the case of the Volvo, this position right here used to be the shift servo, and it had remote steering back here, and I'm going to use the shift servo position for the steering now instead. So the mounts are already there to put the servo here for the steering, so there's nothing else to add to this kit. We installed this as well in the globe liner and the Cascadia, and both of those have a very similar mounting position. And of course this is adjustable on the frame anywhere that you want it to be, so you can simply slide the transmission back and forth until you find a position that works for you. On the short wheelbase globe liner we did have to put a universal shaft on it because the dog bone was too short. It was very short. So this setup works great, and the Cascadia setup works great with the factory drive shaft. Otherwise you may have to put a universal telescopic shaft in the back. But other than that, the truck is ready to roll, and it's got a scale transmission. Thank you for watching the scale transmission LRT installed in our Tamiya Semi. If you have any questions, feel free to leave some in the comments or send us a note on our different media channels. You can find us at GCM Racing. We are on Instagram, we are on Facebook, we are on YouTube on GCM Racing 1, and you can find us all over the place at the web at gcmracing.ca, tinytrucks.com, and a lot of our products are also available at jsscale.net. Thanks for watching.